Before we begin, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and don't forget to like, because once you step inside these walls, you may never look at freedom the same way again. The story opens at dawn, February 2nd, 2025. A heavy fog rolled across the San Francisco Bay, swallowing the bridge in gray silence. On the other side of that mist, sitting like a ghost on the water's edge, stood San Quentin State Prison, America's oldest operating penitentiary. For 172 years, it had been a place where time stopped. The walls, stained with rust and history, had seen the worst of humanity: killers, gang leaders, and men who'd long forgotten what daylight freedom felt like. But on that morning, something stirred deep inside its aging concrete corridors, something that even the guards whispered about later as the incident that almost ended San Quentin. It began in cell block C, known to the inmates as the cage. At 4:07 a.m., Officer Reynolds began his first round of checks. The corridor was dim, the fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped insects. He paused by cell C-214, occupied by Marcus Shade Delaney, a convicted murderer serving 2 life sentences for a double homicide in Oakland. Delaney had been quiet for weeks, too quiet. When Reynolds slid open the inspection window, the cell looked empty. No movement, no breathing, just an eerie stillness. He banged the door twice. "Delaney, count time." No response. He called backup. 2 guards arrived. They opened the door. The bunk was made, the sheets stretched perfectly flat. But what made Reynolds freeze was what lay on the pillow: a small, folded note, pressed neatly under a single coin. It read, "They can lock the body, not the truth." By 4:30 a.m., every alarm inside San Quentin was blaring. Inmates shouted from their cells, metal clanged, boots thundered down the hall. Somehow, in a facility that hadn't had an escape in decades, one of the most closely watched inmates had vanished without a trace. The investigation started immediately. Detective Elena Monroe, from the Marin County Sheriff's Office, was called in. She had seen her share of violent crime, but this case was different. It reeked of inside help. San Quentin's warden, Richard Hale, a strict man with 30 years behind those walls, met her in his office overlooking the yard. He couldn't have gotten out, Hale insisted, voice tense. "There's no way. No breach, no broken locks, no tunnels. It's like he just disappeared." Monroe studied the map of the prison's corridors. "Then either your cameras are lying," she said, "or your people are." When they checked the CCTV footage, what they found only deepened the mystery. At exactly 3:58 a.m., Marcus Delaney was seen pacing in his cell. Then, as the camera flickered just once, his silhouette blurred. When the feed returned, the cell was empty. No one had opened the door. No guard had passed. It was as if the man had evaporated. The footage was forwarded to the state's forensic tech team. But in the meantime, rumors spread through the prison like wildfire. Some inmates swore they heard whispers that night, voices echoing from the old death row block that had been shut down since 2016. Others said they saw someone wearing a guard's uniform walking toward the chapel, carrying a duffel bag. No one could confirm anything. Monroe wasn't the kind to believe in ghosts. She started digging into Delaney's background. Before his arrest, he'd been part of a Bay Area syndicate known as the Hollow Street Kings, a group tied to disappearances, money laundering, and several unsolved murders. But Delaney had never given up names. He'd taken the fall for someone bigger. And maybe now, from inside San Quentin, someone had come to collect that debt. By noon, the investigation uncovered something disturbing. The note found in Delaney's cell wasn't written on standard prison paper. It was from an old San Quentin inmate ledger, the kind used in the 1940s. That ledger was supposed to be locked in the prison's historical archive room, 3 floors underground. When Monroe and the warden went down to check, they found the lock broken. Dust hung in the air like a thin veil. The old records, dating back nearly a century, were scattered across the floor. Mugshots, fingerprints, and faded crime reports lay everywhere. But one file was missing. A file marked Case 1427, A. Delaney. Monroe turned to the warden. "Any relation?" Hale swallowed hard. "That's his grandfather, Arthur Delaney. Executed here in 1954. The detective felt a chill crawl up her spine. The pattern was too deliberate. A man vanishes from a maximum security prison on the anniversary of his grandfather's execution and leaves a note about truth and confinement? This wasn't random. It was planned. As night fell, San Quentin's walls seemed to hum with tension. The guards doubled their shifts. The inmates were locked down. Monroe sat in the observation room, replaying the footage again and again, looking for anything they might have missed. Then, at 11:42 p.m., something flickered on the lower monitor. The chapel camera, the same one that hadn't been checked in years. A figure moved across the pews. The image was grainy, blurred like an old CCTV tape, but Monroe could make out the outline. A man in a prison uniform, his face turned away, walking slowly toward the altar. He stopped, looked straight into the camera, and then the feed went black. The room fell silent. When the technician tried to rewind, the footage was gone. Deleted. Backup file. Monroe asked. The tech hesitated. That camera was disconnected from the system since 2021. It shouldn't even be recording. The warden exhaled slowly. Then who turned it back on? Outside, the fog had rolled in again, thick and heavy. Monroe stood at the window overlooking the yard, the faint glow of the watchtower cutting through the mist. She couldn't shake the feeling that Delaney hadn't escaped the prison. He was still here, somewhere inside those ancient walls. But then the radio crackled. Detective Monroe, you need to see this. We found something in the sub-basement. She grabbed her flashlight and followed the guards down the narrow corridor, past rusted pipes and flaking paint, the air growing colder with every step. At the end of the hall was a locked steel door, one that hadn't been opened in decades. A small plaque above it read, Death Row, 1930 to 1956. The guard turned the key. The hinges groaned. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Dust motes floated in the beam of Monroe's light. And then, in the far corner, she saw it, a single, fresh footprint leading toward a shadowed passage. She crouched down, tracing it with her light. The print wasn't old. It had been made within the last few hours. Monroe whispered, He's not gone. Her radio buzzed again, static first, then a voice. A deep, familiar voice. Detective, you're looking in the wrong place. She froze. The voice was Marcus Delaney's. But the radio was disconnected. And that's when the lights went out. The blackout lasted 47 seconds. That may not sound long, but inside San Quentin, it felt like eternity. The entire prison fell into chaos, shouting, metal clanging, emergency lights flickering to life. When power returned, the control room monitors blinked back one by one, except for one feed, the sub-basement camera, where Detective Elena Monroe had just been standing. She was gone. At 12:05 a.m., guards swarmed the lower level. Their flashlights cut through the dark as they shouted her name. Detective Monroe, if you can hear us, respond. But the hallway was empty. Only her flashlight lay on the floor, beam still trembling against the far wall, illuminating a message scrawled in thick black ink. Not everything buried stays dead. The warden ordered an immediate lockdown. Every cell door slammed shut. Sirens howled across the yard. The prison, already on edge from Delaney's disappearance, had just lost the lead investigator. By morning, the media had caught wind. Detective missing inside San Quentin. The headline screamed. Reporters swarmed the gate, cameras flashing, demanding answers. But the warden had none to give. The governor was on the phone, the FBI wanted in, and the entire staff was under scrutiny. Forensic teams combed the sub-basement. They found no sign of struggle, no fingerprints, no blood, nothing but that strange, handwritten message. But then came the real shock. When technicians tried to pull the backup footage from the surveillance servers, they discovered that 5 hours of video data, from midnight to 5 a.m., had been wiped completely clean. Not corrupted, deleted. Only one person in the prison had clearance to access that system, Warden Hale. When confronted, his hands trembled. You think I had something to do with this? He barked. I've been trying to keep this place together for 30 years. You think I'd risk everything now? But Monroe's disappearance, Delaney's vanishing act, and the missing footage all pointed toward a coordinated cover-up. The FBI Special Agent Daniel Reeves, a calm, methodical man known for exposing institutional corruption, was assigned to the case. He met Hale in the warden's office, the room heavy with tension. Reeves set down a photo, a grainy still from an old archive. It showed Arthur Delaney, Marcus's grandfather, in handcuffs, escorted down the very same hallway where Monroe vanished. Reeves said quietly, "Your files show Arthur Delaney was executed in 1954, but there's no record of his body ever being buried. Do you know what that means, Warden?" Hale swallowed hard. "It means someone made sure he disappeared before anyone could ask questions." Reeves nodded, just like his grandson. San Quentin had always been a fortress of silence, secrets layered beneath decades of concrete. But as the FBI expanded the search, they uncovered something extraordinary. Behind the old death row chamber, sealed off since the 1960s, workers found a false wall. Inside it, a narrow tunnel led to a hidden room, filled with dusty ledgers, torn mugshots, and stacks of personal effects, tagged with inmate numbers long erased from the records. Reeves and his team moved carefully through the chamber. The smell of age and mildew hung thick in the air. On one of the tables sat a cracked leather-bound journal. On the cover, barely visible beneath the dust, was a name, Arthur Delaney. Reeves opened it. The pages were yellowed, edges brittle. But the writing was clear, angry, desperate. They promised freedom in exchange for silence. But they never meant to let me leave this place. The truth about San Quentin will never see daylight. They buried it with us. The last page ended abruptly, but a loose photo slipped out from between the pages. It showed a group of prison guards, taken sometime in the early 1950s, standing proudly beside a row of prisoners. One of the guards looked almost identical to Warden Hale. Reeves frowned. "That can't be right." Hale stepped closer, eyes wide. "That's my grandfather." A chill filled the room. Reeves turned to him. "So the Delaneys and the Hales, they go back generations in this prison. Maybe this isn't just about one inmate. Maybe it's about the system itself." As night fell again over San Quentin, tension rippled through every cell. Inmates whispered through the vents. Some claimed to have seen Detective Monroe walking the upper tiers that afternoon, pale, silent, wearing a torn uniform, though she hadn't been found. Others said the prison was cursed, that the walls themselves were keeping score. Reeves didn't believe in curses. He believed in cover-ups, and he was getting closer to one. At 2:47 a.m., while reviewing the confiscated footage on an isolated hard drive, he noticed something strange. During the first seconds of the deleted time window, one camera had recorded for exactly 12 seconds before cutting out. The footage showed the sub-basement corridor again. A shadow moved past the lens, tall male, wearing an outdated correctional officer's uniform, the kind phased out in the 1980s. The figure turned briefly toward the camera, revealing a name tag that read, R. Hale. Reeves froze the frame. The face, though blurred, looked unmistakably like the current warden. He played it again. Same frame, same name tag, same face. But the timestamp on the footage read, January 16th, 1954, 3:12 a.m. Reeves whispered, "That's impossible." The digital team confirmed that the footage hadn't been tampered with. Somehow, the system had re-recorded an archival image into a modern timestamp, as though the past and present had overlapped for those 12 seconds. When Reeves confronted Warden Hale again, the man's composure cracked. "There are things about this place you don't understand," Hale said quietly. "My family has kept San Quentin running for generations. The records, the old executions, the experiments, the cover-ups, they were never supposed to see daylight." Reeves stepped closer. "What kind of cover-ups?" The warden's eyes were bloodshot. "They built more than a prison here. They built a lie." He handed Reeves a yellowing document from his desk, stamped confidential, state property, 1953. It detailed an internal investigation about experimental isolation procedures conducted on inmates in the early 50s. The report concluded abruptly. Results deemed classified under State Order 19C. Reeves scanned the pages. "Who authorized this?" Hale looked up, his voice shaking. "Arthur Delaney was the whistleblower. He tried to expose it. They silenced him." At that moment, The radio on Hale's desk crackled. A voice cut through the static, the same deep, deliberate tone from Chapter 1. "Agent Reeves, tell them the walls remember." Reeves stared at the radio. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps echoing over concrete. The line went dead. Outside, the prison sirens began wailing again. Guards were shouting. "Another breach. Cell block D." Reeves and Hale ran down the corridor toward the commotion. When they reached the block, they froze. Every cell door stood wide open, and in the center of the tier, written across the floor in charcoal dust, were the words, "Sins of the Fathers." The power flickered again, plunging the tier into dim emergency light. Reeves raised his flashlight toward the upper level and saw a figure watching them from above. It was Marcus Delaney, but his uniform was different now, older, faded, the badge from another era. He turned, walked toward the stairwell, and disappeared into the shadows. The man standing on the upper tier, Marcus Delaney, looked like a ghost pulled from another time. His uniform, stained and threadbare, wasn't standard issue. The badge on his chest bore the emblem of San Quentin, 1954. "Marcus!" Reeves shouted. His voice bounced down the concrete walls. The figure didn't turn. Instead, he descended the stairwell slowly, each step deliberate, echoing like a countdown. By the time Reeves reached the lower tier, Marcus was gone again, vanished into one of the access tunnels near the old death row wing. The guards moved in with flashlights and rifles, sweeping every cell, every corner. Nothing. It was as though he'd stepped off the map. But Reeves knew one thing. Marcus Delaney wasn't a ghost. He was real, and he wanted something. Hours later, inside the control center, Reeves replayed the old surveillance clip from Chapter 2, the one showing a man in an outdated uniform labeled R. Hale. He placed it beside a newly recovered frame from that night's riot. This one showed Marcus Delaney, moving through the corridor in the same direction as the old image, almost matching the movement perfectly. Two men, 70 years apart, mirroring each other like history, refusing to die. Reeves muttered under his breath, "The sins of the fathers." Warden Hale entered the room, exhausted, face gray under the fluorescent light. "They've called for an evacuation," he said. "Too much unrest. Too much exposure." "Not yet," Reeves replied. "There's one place we haven't searched, beneath the chapel." Hale froze. "How do you know about that?" "Because that's where the old death records end," Reeves said, holding up Arthur Delaney's journal. "And that's where your family's history begins." The chapel at San Quentin had been closed for years. Dust coated the pews, and faint graffiti marked the stained glass windows. Beneath the altar, Reeves found a hatch sealed with a rusted lock. He pried it open with a crowbar. A cold draft rose from the darkness below. The warden hesitated. "There's nothing down there worth finding." Reeves ignored him and climbed down the iron ladder. Hale followed reluctantly. Their flashlights pierced a long, narrow corridor. On both sides were rows of stone niches, each bearing rusted nameplates, inmate numbers, no names. Some were empty. Others weren't. At the far end, they reached a reinforced steel door, half-sealed with concrete. Carved into it, faintly visible under the light, were the words, "Delaney, Cell 0." Reeves's pulse quickened. He chipped away at the concrete until the door creaked open. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside was a small room, walls blackened by age, air thick with rot. In the center sat an old wooden chair, still chained to the floor. A cracked tag hung from the shackle. "Property of State Project 19C. Reeves turned to Hale. "Your family ran this, didn't they? Isolation experiments, using prisoners like Delaney." Hale's voice trembled. "My grandfather said it was for behavioral control. But after the first few tests, they sealed it off. Too many died. Too much blood." Reeves knelt beside a small metal box half buried in dust. Inside were film reels, brittle with age, and a single tape marked January 16th, 1954. He slid it into a portable player. The footage flickered to life. A black and white image appeared, Arthur Delaney, strapped to the same chair, eyes hollow but defiant. A man in a white coat stood beside him, Raymond Hale Sr., the warden's grandfather. Arthur looked into the camera. His voice was barely a whisper. They said they could erase pain. Instead, they erased us. The screen cut to static. Reeves turned to Hale. He tried to expose your family. That's why they silenced him. Hale's face collapsed under the weight of it. He didn't just die here, he said quietly. They used him as part of the trials. They tested sensory deprivation, no sound, no light for months. Reeves whispered, and now his grandson is finishing what he started. The sound of footsteps echoed above them. Then a voice. Calm, low, and chillingly familiar. You finally found it. Reeves spun around. Marcus Delaney stood at the entrance, half-shrouded in shadow. His eyes glowed faintly in the beam of the flashlight. I've been waiting for someone to listen, Marcus said. But you were never supposed to come this far. Reeves stepped forward cautiously. What happened to Detective Monroe? Marcus's gaze didn't waver. She saw the files. She tried to leave. The warden made sure she wouldn't. Hale's face twisted. That's a lie. Marcus smirked. Then tell him where she is. Hale said nothing. Reeves's heart sank. You buried her here, didn't you? Marcus took a step closer. The walls don't lie, Agent. They remember every scream. He gestured toward the far corner, where the concrete was newly patched. Reeves crossed the room, chipped at the wall, and found a badge embedded in the cement. It read, Detective E. Monroe. Reeves turned back, but Marcus was gone again, his footsteps fading into the tunnel beyond. By dawn, the entire lower level was sealed off. Reeves filed his report, though parts of it would never see daylight. Within 48 hours, Warden Hale resigned. He claimed it was due to health reasons, though insiders knew better. The footage, the files, and the secret chamber beneath the chapel, all were classified under federal order. Marcus Delaney was never seen again. But weeks later, the FBI received a package, no return address. Inside was a flash drive. The only file on it was a restored version of the missing surveillance clip from Chapter 1, the one where Marcus dragged something across the corridor. This time, the image was clearer. It wasn't a body. It was a box of files, marked Project 19C. Reeves replayed the clip again and again. The final frame froze on Marcus's face, tired, hollow, yet strangely peaceful. A caption flashed on screen. Some prisons were never built for inmates, they were built for secrets. Months later, San Quentin's death row was officially decommissioned, but locals still whispered that, on quiet nights, you could hear footsteps beneath the chapel, echoes of those who never made it out. As for Agent Reeves, he transferred out of the bureau, moved north, and never spoke of the case again. But in a rare interview years later, when asked what he believed happened inside San Quentin, he said one chilling line. Sometimes justice isn't about what you prove, it's about what you survive. The camera fades to black. A single line appears on screen. They thought they buried the truth, but the truth never stays buried. Then the outro hits. Studio microphone. If you think this story was dark, you're not ready for what's coming next. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and remember, every wall has a story.